Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for attending the first Beyond the Basics workshop. My name is Emily Hemmerling, and I'm the coordinator of library services at Hutchinson Community College. And our moderator today is Judy Baston from Butler Community College. If you'd like, feel free to drop your name, where you're from, and what courses you teach in the chat. If you have any questions or need clarifications as I go along, please ask those in the chat, and Judy will make sure that I get to those.
My name's Dan Williams. I'm the director of theater at Barton Community College. I teach acting and I teach stagecraft. I teach stage and theater management.
All right. All right. Well, we're glad to have you. Okay, so today, this is the plan. This workshop series is meant to build off of the faculty workshops the OER steering committee has hosted the last few years that introduces the problem of textbook affordability and accessibility and the ways that open educational resources, or OER, can be used as a solution. My plan today is to just quickly recap the information and then move into the different places to find OER, the steps to evaluate it, adopting OER for your courses. And I will be stopping at a few points to give you time to actually do a bit of searching and evaluating. One of the biggest constraints to OER adoption is simply finding the time to look for possible textbooks and review them. So my hope today is that you can at least start the process. Some of the slides will contain a lot of links. I just kind of put a lot of the resources all together. I'm happy to send the link out to the slides so that you have all of those. So don't feel like you need to frantically be writing down websites. Okay, so to sum up our previous presentations on OER, OER are materials that are licensed to be freely used, edited, and distributed. So this includes textbooks. They are full, real textbooks, and they are used by many faculty across the country. It also includes supportive materials such as videos, music, different assignments, lab activities, reading, syllabi, and entire courses. OER can help alleviate the burden of textbook costs for students because they are free to use. And they can provide faculty with content that can be customized for their course because they can be edited and redistributed. Okay, so we're going to start off with the tips on finding OER. My biggest tip is to have at least something resembling a plan before you start searching. So the first step is to create a list of keywords, synonyms, and related subjects first. So for example, if you're looking for OER on ecology, you might also want to search for environmental science. I'm going to get all these tips up here first. Okay. So you might want to use environmental science, environmental biology, zoology, botany, conservation biology, and forestry as search terms to kind of cast a really broad net to see what you can capture. Another tip is to go broad. And so go to a wider subject that might have chapters on your topic. So then we can add in biology, life science, and natural science. If you're looking for materials to support specific modules or assignments, then you can go back to the language used in your course goals and outcomes. You can also use the system-wide transfer data if the course is a transfer course to find core outcomes. So for example, ecology, I don't think it's on the transfer list, but environmental science is. So this is the link to the system-wide transfer kind of portal where you can look up different classes, and they have a PDF with each one that lists the core outcomes. So on environmental science, one of the current outcomes is to be able to propose components of a sustainable future. So you might want to add the term sustainability to your list of search terms. My last big tip is to not get hung up on minor issues you have with the OER you find, because one of the magical things about OER is that it is already licensed to allow you to change it. If you don't like the way a concept is explained, or you feel an example is outdated or irrelevant or culturally insensitive, you can change it. So this is where we're going to take our first quick stop right off the bat. for a minute or two, I want you to actually start writing down any keywords, related subjects or broader subjects of the courses we're teaching and looking for OER. If you're feeling brave, I will put the link to the System Wide Transfer list and you can search for course outcomes. Or if you already have them handy for your particular course, you can just look at those for any additional terms. So let me get this link. When you go to this page, you can just go right to the Transfer Kansas portal link. So while we wait, I'm also happy to answer any questions so far.
It doesn't seem like we have any right yet, Emily.
Well,
but
that's great because we're only like 30 seconds into the presentation, so I'm glad so far.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do we handle if there, for example, I work in ESOL and we have the exact same thing I'm looking for could be listed under ESOL or ESL or ELL or EL.
Yeah.
How can I include all of those in my search for materials?
So if you are going if you go to one of the websites that we're about to go into, it will be easier if you just type each one of those terms in individually. That will probably be the simplest. I think if you go, I'll go through like a blind Google search, but I think if you type in anything, any string of those or with any Boolean operators, it's going to kind of come back a little bit of a mess. So I would just plan on taking a little bit more time and trying each one of those separately. Okay, does anybody want to share the keywords and related subjects that they've come up with? Again, yeah, and this is all voluntary. Don't feel like you need to. This is just to kind of provide you time to actually sit down and start looking for things that might work. Okay, I'll assume you all have an awesome list and we will go on to the next step. Once you have all these keywords and search terms and synonyms, now we're actually going to first go to OER specific websites. I think your absolute best bet to finding OER materials is going to be going directly to repositories created specifically for this purpose. I will get to the blind Google search at the end, but if you're new to this and just want to dip your toe in, you really want to start with one of these sites. Some of these places have been around for decades. They have their own internal vetting and cataloging procedures. And so I have divided this by format. Most faculty are going to be looking at textbook adoption first. So that's where we'll start. And these are going to be the four main ones. Open Textbook Library compiles a lot of the OER textbooks, and they come with reviews from faculty just like you. So this is usually my first stop because it gives me an idea of the most used OER textbooks out there. So we're going to take a field trip. So the OTL, they'll have their search box right at the front if you're looking for something specific. Otherwise, they'll have all the new books that they've just added, and you can also browse by subject. So we're going to start with, we'll try education. So everything will kind of pop up, so you can just search. And so here we have all the search results for education. So we'll just kind of go, I saw health. So let's look at the health education, basic information right at the, or with the result, and then it'll let you look at the table of contents, and you can just go straight to the PDF. You can start looking through it to review it. You can also find the copyright information is right there. And then this one, it looks like has about 14 reviews. So you can read all the reviews, and they're all very lengthy. They have a specific format that they want. So then you can just go through their reviews and see what other people have said. The next one is OpenStax. OpenStax is one of the OGs of OER, and they are affiliated with Rice University. So we'll take another little gander at OpenStax. So a lot of OpenStax books are for big gen ed and transfer courses, so like biology, statistics, and sociology. So if you teach one of those bigger gen ed classes, OpenStax will probably have the book that you're looking for. And then I won't go into Pressbooks and LibreTexts. They're fairly new. They're new platforms specifically for OER creation, but they are growing in size. And the books housed on those platforms don't necessarily make it to the larger repositories because they're kind of unto themselves. They're different companies. So when you're looking for textbooks, I would search in all 4 of them. Again, that would give you the best bet of finding what's out there. And as I've mentioned, textbooks are not the only OER out there. There are online courses, individual assignments, lab modules, reading lists, slide decks, all kinds of things. However, these are not always as easy to sift through, and they can be overwhelming. So I think once you kind of have done some searching through the textbook repositories, then you can go to these other aggregators, for lack of a better word, and give yourself some patience, give yourself a little bit of time on that learning curve, and you can sometimes find some gems. So OER Commons, Merlot, and then Mason OER MetaFinder. So we can go to OER Commons. So here they have a little bit more of a complex search engine. You can apply some filters right at the beginning. So we can go, what was I looking for before? We'll go leadership. And you can also filter it by education level. So I work at a community college, so most of the time I'm going to be looking for lower division. So OER Commons will pull from all these different sites and kind of put it all into one list. And then you can look at the type of material it is. So here is self-management and leadership. And the material type is that is a contained module. The next one, you can look down material type, and that's a full textbook. The next one is an activity. So if you're looking for more specific things to use for assignments or for labs, this is a good place to go to see what other people have been doing and what other people have been making. Merlot is very similar to OER Commons. Mason OER MetaFinder, our mom, is going to be very particular about what you type in, but you can enter a general search term in the full record field. And what that means is it's going to search that term across the entire document. So the title, author, and keywords. But what I really like Mom for is it pulls from all of these different sites. So it will list OER specific sites that I sometimes forget about. It's like the Applied Science and Math repository. There's a directory of open access books. LibreTexts we already know, Merlot we already know, but I kind of forget about some of these other places. It also will list in the deeper search area. These are sites that aren't necessarily OER in that they're not licensed for adaptations, but they are free resources that you can incorporate. So if your goal is to have a 0 textbook cost or a low textbook cost, you can still use these sites to pull from those resources. Okay, so next is media, or photos, videos, and music. So the first 3 places I'm going to list up are for photos. So I'm going to we'll go into Pixabay. Because when you go into the media sites, you kind of have to be a little bit more aware of the copyright license. And I'll do a review here in a sec of what we're looking for. But basically we want it kind of spelled out that we can use this image or this music or this video, and we can freely edit it. And so we'll click on, let's go with the zebra. So here, Pixabay, I'll say the Pixabay license. We'll say free to use under the Pixabay license, no attributions required. However, attribution is still kind of good practice. So if you go to the actual description of the license, it will actually say that you can use the image and you can freely edit it. So sometimes finding those licenses does require a little bit of reading just to verify. But for the most part, these three places are going to have those open licenses for their work, where you can freely use the image and you can edit it how you need to. And so Unsplash is very similar to Pixabay. Okay, so CC Mixer and Free Music Archive, those are open access music repositories. So usually these are used by faculty or students who want to use music as part of lecture videos or as assignments, where students are creating videos or podcasts or need background music. It's not super common to need to use those, but in the case where you have a specific assignment, those are going to be places that you want to go. And again, right when you click on them, they will tell you that this is a royalty-free music, safe to use in all kinds of media like YouTube, Facebook, and podcast episodes. So they're going to be very clear in their license terms. Okay, last on my media list is YouTube. Oh, YouTube. It's wild. But YouTube does offer its creators what's called a Creative Commons Attribution License. It's not very common. Most creators don't use it because this is how they make their money. So they're not going to allow everybody to use it freely and cut it up and reshare it. But there are those that do. So what we're going to look for, I have linked to an OER video website called the Electric Academy. And so we're going to click on a video, and what you're going to do to look for that license, you're going to go to the description under Show More, and there it will specifically have the license link to it, to the Creative Commons Attribution License. And then when you follow that link, it will explicitly say, by marking your video with this license, you're granting everybody the right to reuse and edit that video. So again, very clearly stating that you can use this video and you can edit it and cut it up how you need to use it. Okay, so that's the most like information dense slide is all the different places that you can go to start looking for different types of OER.
Emily,
Yeah,
we did have a couple of questions.
Yes, let's take a question break.
So Sheldon asked, in one of the sites that popped up, I caught a glimpse of LMS integration. Can you elaborate on that just a bit?
Yes, so LMS integration, because I think all of OER is in a digital format, is going to integrate pretty seamlessly with whatever LMS your institution has. So here at HCC, we have Canvas, and it's very easy to link out to these different places. So we can link out to the site, like say we're going to open text with library, like here is that education book. We can put that right into Canvas. There's also an option if you are going to adapt some of that text, where you can just copy and paste that directly into Canvas and you can just move that text over. Same if it has a PDF format, you can load those PDFs directly into your course module. So I think if you're more interested in in the nuts and bolts of that, I think that's the second or third, probably the third workshop in our series is where it kind of goes through. We'll have some instructional designers and instructional technologists who have done that kind of work before. And so they will kind of walk you through that process. Great question.
Linda asked, did I hear you will post all of these links in one place for us to access later?
Yes, so in my head, what I'd like to do is after the presentation, I will probably email out a shareable link to this Google Slides. So you'll be able to have all the links in one spot.
And then she also asked, do you mean I shouldn't use YouTube video if it doesn't have the creative use license attached?
It depends on what you're using it for. If you are just using it to show your students, yes, you can use that to put into your course module or show your students something. If you want to edit that video or mix it with some other video to make something new, that is when you will need to have that Creative Commons attribution license. So that's the big difference. So all of OER is it's all free to use. The big difference is that it's also free to edit.
And that's it that we have so far.
Okay, great. Okay, so another option, if you are, especially if you're pressed for time and you're in a big gen ed class or even not a gen ed class, it kind of depends, is you can look to see what other people are doing. And this is where a big advantage lies in curated lists. So curated lists are public listings of courses and the OER being used in that course that have been put together by other institutions. So again, OER is nothing new. It's growing exponentially across the country. And a lot of, especially statewide systems, have put together OER lists of their core classes. So we'll take a look at these. The first one is my favorite. It's out of a nonprofit in British Columbia. And it's still being added to is the OER by discipline directory. So this is an OER book, so we can click on to read it. And then under the contents, it will have all the different subjects that they are working with. So we can go down to, here we go, we'll go computer science. So if you're teaching a computer science course, you can go down here, and so we'll go computer science general. And under each of these kind of sections, it will have, we can look at all the different textbooks that they have listed. So they have sort of compiled all the different textbooks that they have been able to find so far. So they have been continually adding to these. So these would all be OER textbooks you can look at. Same with supplemental materials and whole courses, different collections that you can look at. So very handy. Another curated list is through the University System of Georgia, and there's also California Community Colleges. We can look at the one by Georgia. And so these are all the open textbooks that they use. You can browse by subjects, you can type something specific in, and then you can just see what all they're using. So this is another great resource, especially if you don't really feel like starting from scratch. Oh, and Iowa too. So the last link that I've put on this slide is, so Kansas, we have not put together a full OER by discipline list yet, one of these curated lists. What we have instead is we have what we're calling discipline liaisons. So if you follow this link, these are faculty across the state that have volunteered their time to be a point of contact to help you in your OER journey for your class. So you can go by discipline, and if you're in history, you can contact Tim Miller. They are familiar with OER, they've been using OER, they've been adapting OER, and you can just email them with your questions and see what they're using and what their advice is. So yeah, so you have your personal contact here that you can get in touch with, someone that matches your topic. Okay, so now we're on the Google search. So if you have struck out on every other method, the repositories don't have what you want, there's nothing on a curated list, or the liaison couldn't help, then a Google search should be your last ditch effort. And there are two ways to do a Google search. The first way, which will turn up a few more relevant results with actual resources listed on them, is to take advantage of LibGuides. So LibGuides are online research guides put together by academic librarians for specific programs, courses, or assignments. These pages usually have links to all the resources students would need, like a link to the OER textbook being used in that class, which might help you out as you're searching. And many librarians have started creating those LibGuides for just subject-specific OER. So the best way to find those is to type in your subject. So you're going to go to Google, you're going to type in, you don't put the brackets, just type in biology, OER, LibGuides, and then see what comes up. So for example, I ran a search for a business course. And so these are all the OER for business at this institution. And so these are different textbooks. Here's all the courseware, more textbooks, and there's TED Talks on there. So these are all different OER resources if you're teaching a business class that you could look into. Okay, and then the second way is just a regular Google search, the Hail Mary, where you just type in your subject and OER. So when I have worked with faculty, they usually try this way first, and then they can't find anything and they get really frustrated. So use this way last, go to the repositories first, and then the curated list, and then the LibGuide, and then try just a regular Google search. Sometimes you do find little nuggets hidden, on page 15, but sometimes just a regular Google search it's just kind of inefficient. Okay, so we're going to take our next little break for another couple minutes. I am going to put some of these links into the chat for you to actually go into these places and start doing a little bit of searching. So you have your search terms that we already put together. And if you have time, go look through at least 2 sites, but one site is kind of fine, just to see if you come up with anything. Okay, so I'll put these links into the chat. And again, if you have questions, this would be a good time too. Okay, we'll give about 1 more minute. Okay, so we're going to continue on. Hopefully, during your little search, you're able to find at least some things or kind of get on the right track. Sometimes the hardest part is just dipping that toe in and getting started. So we're going to move on to evaluating OER. So in my experience working with faculty, finding OER is the hardest part of the whole process. And evaluation tends to be much easier than they think it will be. So this, in my opinion, is because they forget that they are the expert on this subject. You know what will be a good fit for your course and what you feel comfortable with and what you are excited by. So really in practice, evaluating OER follows the same process as any other classroom material. However, there are going to be a few additional considerations regarding accessibility and copyright. So for the most part, you're going to be evaluating OER for content alignment. Just like with a traditional textbook or publisher supplied material, does it cover the material you need to cover? Is it accurate and current? It also needs to match the course description and any outcomes or competencies associated with the course. So again, if the course is a transfer course, we can go back to that system-wide transfer portal, and you can look at the outcomes there. Because OER is going to come in a digital format, there are some extra considerations for accessibility you just need to be aware of. You don't need to get into the weeds or the nitty-gritty details when you are just first doing an evaluation, because once again, you and your institution's instructional technology team already have the license to address any issues. You can go ahead and change things to make them more accessible if you need to. Again, a plug for that third workshop is on accessibility. So if you are more interested in that and what that means, definitely sign up for that one. I think that will be in April. So I'm just going to go over some of the big ones that at least we initially look for here. You can get really granular if you need to, but these are the main ones. The first one is responsive design or responsiveness, which is the ability of a website or the OER material itself to adapt to the user's screen. So if you have ever tried to be on a website on your phone and you can't see the whole website on the screen, or you have to like scroll around, then that website is not responsive and therefore not accessible. And it's also just very annoying. Alt text or alternative text for images is another big one. If a student is visually impaired, the added content of graphics or pictures is not going to come through. By adding alt text to those images, a screen reader can describe the graphic or picture and give the needed context. You also want to have transcripts and/or captions available for any audiovisual materials. So some of the accessibility elements may be hard for you to evaluate, especially when it comes to screen readers. If you want to get a more in-depth evaluation of accessibility, I strongly suggest you work with the instructional technologists and instructional designers at your institution. They are the accessibility experts. But again, for the initial evaluation, you just want to make yourself aware of any potential issues that will need to be fixed before making it available to your students. There's also, I'm just going to put this link here, is for the OER accessibility toolkit. Kind of goes through all the things you ever want to know about accessibility. And they offer a checklist for looking for evaluating OER based on accessibility. Okay, so the next consideration is the copyright license. Remember, OER is both free to use and free to adapt and reshare. And the vast majority will carry a Creative Commons licensing that tells you exactly what you can and cannot do. However, there may be additional restrictions that could impact how you can use the material once you've changed it. So this is just a quick primer slide. Again, we're not going to go too in depth. So once you see the CC, that just stands for Creative Commons. BY is just the attribution, which means you can do pretty much anything you want to the work, but you just have to give credit to the original creator. If you see the little circle, back circle with an arrow, the share alike means that any adaptations that you make must be shared using the same licensing terms. So that's what this example up here is for. So if you're working or you're editing something that carries a non-commercial element and a share alike, that means you have to also share it with a non-commercial element, which means that no one can make a profit from it. So that's the next one. The NC means that you can use the work however you want, but you just cannot profit from it. This kind of comes into play more if you are wanting to include, say, an OER essay in a larger anthology that you plan to sell. But if it carries a non-commercial license, that would be a copyright violation. If you come across something that says no derivatives, the equal sign, that is not an open license. That means that you can use it, but you cannot adapt or remix it. So sometimes you'll come across things with a CC license, but it'll have no derivatives, and that's not OER. So again, you don't need to get into the weeds of copyright during the first evaluation. You're just looking to make sure that you can do what you would like to do with any revisions you plan to make. Okay. I'm including this slide for those of you that prefer a more structured approach to evaluation, or if you like to keep track of your justifications and thoughts, or if your department requires a more structured or written evaluation for a textbook. So the first checklist by Texas State University Libraries is probably the most in-depth checklist I've seen. It has several categories, different checkboxes that you can go through. You can make all the different comments. I think it goes through anything you could possibly think of for evaluating any text, not just OER. Okay. And then the next one by Affordable Learning Georgia is just kind of a pared down version of that. It's a little bit more streamlined. It has like the same components, but fewer questions you can go through. So just making sure that it's readable, it's accurate, you can adapt it, it's appropriate for your class, it's accessible, and a bonus point if it has ancillaries or any supplementary resources. Okay, so we don't have time for a full evaluation because you don't have time to read a full textbook in 2 minutes. But if you want, you can make a note of this is the very basic evaluation checklist that we kind of encourage here, especially for first-time faculty doing that first initial evaluation. So this is just part of that worksheet. You can make yourself on scratch paper or on the computer, and just make sure you list the title, the 3 basic attributes that we just went over, and any notes you want to make. So some people find this helpful. Other faculty, they've been in this a long time, so they can basically read something and they know it's going to be a good fit or not a good fit. Okay, are there any questions at this little checkpoint?
No, Emily, there aren't any yet.
Okay, so we're going to go on to the last one. We have finally made it. So after you have gone through the whole process of finding OER for your course, evaluating it for content and accessibility, it is time to formally adopt it as your new textbook or to include it into your course. So The actual adoption process is going to depend on your institution, but here at HCC, it is exactly the same as a traditional textbook. If your institution has zero textbook or low textbook cost course marking, or you adopted the OER as part of an incentive program, you will need to follow those instructions. However, all OER you use will need to be listed somewhere in your course with an attribution, because usually giving attribution is going to be the easiest. Oh, excuse me. It's going to be easiest to do this right on the syllabus or within the course shell if you are using like Canvas or Blackboard or something similar to those courses or for your courses. This is because all CC licenses, which most OER carry, require attribution. Every once in a while, you might find something that's been placed purposely into the public domain that does not require that. But again, giving attribution is just still a good practice. So on a syllabus or in a module, you could use the following language. The textbook for this class will be insert title for here. The example is Web Literacy for Student Fact Checkers. Is available for free through the Open Textbook Library. We've noticed that students get really excited when they see that for free right up at the top of the syllabus. It kind of sets a good tone. So you can add that in. And then the actual attribution you can put right below it, where it is usually followed, excuse me. It follows the format of title, author, source, license. So if you're listing this attribution in digital format, you can link the source or the URL of the book right to the title, and then the author, and then the license. And so again, it could be helpful to link the actual license. Creative Commons has all their licenses listed on their website, because that way others can easily find out what that means and what they can also do with the work. Okay, and these are just the main places that I have pulled information from for this presentation. This is my attribution page. And are there any questions? Like I have 3 minutes to spare in the time I set for myself. So any questions, anything you guys want to share from your searches or finding anything?
One question,
Yeah.
there is one question from Linda. That attribution is not the way students should cite information used, is it? Aren't there still APA guidelines, et cetera?
Yes, Linda, you are correct. So attribution is different from a citation. Attributions are legal requirements because it is part of that Creative Commons license, the legal license. You have to include that language. A citation is different. That's more of an ethical academic thing that you need to include. So those are two separate things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
It's Linda.
Okay.
Linda
Okay,
saying yes.
I can elaborate, but then what can I get into?
I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's
Thank you
okay.
very much. That's very clear.
Yeah. All right, so if there are no more questions or no questions that you want to ask right now, feel free to contact me. I think my email is on the front slide. Otherwise, I will try to send out an email with a link to the slide deck that you guys can use. And hope you'll check out the other workshops in their series. I think our next one will be in March on adapting OER.
We will be covering similar, it's kind of bridges really nicely with the evaluation because we will be covering, we're going to look again at the licensing, the Creative Commons licensing, and some other things and some attribution too. Maybe looking a little bit more at the adaptation statement if you're making changes to your course or to the textbook or whatever you're using.
Great. All right, well, thank you for coming, everyone, on a cold afternoon. That's all we have for you. So enjoy your day. Thank you.